Yeah, it should have happened in the summer, and that's not on Erik ten Hag, that's on the new ownership model who've come into the club, and all they've done is kick the can down the road for, what is it, 9 league games that Manchester United have played this season, and cost themselves 200 million quid in terms of, bringing players in the summer who the manager would have identified, who maybe came to the club as well because they had a relationship with the manager in the past, and it just seems daft really, the fact that they kept him in the job, because it was always inevitable this was going to happen. He had to hit the ground running, he had to almost be top of the league there or thereabouts really to possibly stay in a job. And I always feel international breaks in September, October, November are always almost a graveyard for managers really, and I felt it would carry on for the next couple of weeks until they got to the November international break and they'd make the change then. But it looks like they've made the change now, and maybe that gives them a few weeks to get out of the other side of the November international break with a new manager.
Jamie, 8 managers have had a go since Sir Alex Ferguson. Why is it so difficult, this job? Why is no one getting it right?
Well, I think it probably shows as well how special a manager Sir Alex Ferguson was. We all know about the trophies that he won, but I think most people felt when he moved on that Manchester United were the biggest club in the country, spent the most money, so success would continue. Maybe not at the height of Alex Ferguson, but certainly always be competing for the biggest trophies. But it hasn't happened. There's a lot of talk of the structure behind the club, and a lot of managers in the past, and I hope Erik ten Hag doesn't use this excuse as well, they always talk about the structure of the club, and we all agree the structure of the club has not been right for a long time, and that's why Ineos have come in. But the structure at Manchester United is not right for the club, not necessarily for the manager, because normally when you have a strong structure at a club, they say no to the manager when they want to do certain things. I think the problem with Manchester United is they've always said yes, no matter what the manager's wanted, whether he's bought the right players in certain people's eyes or whether he's buying a player, someone like Casemiro. You don't spend £70 million on someone who's over 30, who Real Madrid are happy to move on. That's just one example. And a strong structure at a football club would say no in those situations. And I just think for far too long, all the managers that Manchester United have had, whoever they've wanted to sign, and more often than not, they've gone back to their old clubs, even going back to Louis van Gaal, buying Dutch players. They just buy exactly who they want, no matter what the feel, no matter what the age. And the structure in the club has got to come in now. Obviously, we know it's Ineos and Sir Jim Ratcliffe, and they've got to start saying no to managers and bringing in the right, type of player. Also, for any manager coming in, Manchester United have more eyes and more media attention than any club in this country. So every time there's a few bad results or there's pressure on the manager, it gets magnified because of the size of the club. But that's the price on the ticket.
Jamie, it sounds to me, and I might be wrong, that you've got a lot of sympathy for Erik ten Hag, and you feel that it's the club that's responsible for the situation they find themselves in.
I wouldn't say it's sympathy, if I'm being totally honest. I mean, he was given an opportunity to fix what went wrong last season when I think in most people's eyes he shouldn't have been. Now, nobody likes to see anybody lose the job, but I just think from Ineos's point of view, I just think they've completely messed this up in the summer. And just got basically carried away by emotion on the fact that they beat Manchester City in a cup final, and it was a happy day. The supporters come out to Wembley delighted, and they're probably in a situation like, what do we do now? Because it was well documented. They spoke to 4 or 5 different managers. As soon as you start that, you know you have no belief in the manager. The manager knows you're speaking to other people, and in the last week or so, the reports have came out that they've been speaking to a couple of other candidates as well, one being Xavi in Barcelona. Whether that's true, who knows? But the fact the manager has now lost his job on the next game that he loses against West Ham, I think proves that they've obviously been in discussions with managers again in these last few weeks. So, listen, for Erik ten Hag, it's been going wrong basically for 18 months, but I don't think Ineos have made a great start since they've come into the club as well. Everyone felt it'd be completely different to the Glazers, but it's early days for them. But I think the summer's been a mess, and it's cost them basically 150 to 200 million pound that they didn't need to waste. They could have given that to the new manager on players exactly who he wants or the club see fit, not more players that Erik ten Hag wants.
Well, that's the thing. He spent £600 million on players that he did want. I just spoke to Louis Sahar. He told me that he felt some of those players have underperformed. Does this lie a lot with the players, or does this lie with the manager? Where do you think the responsibility for this lies?
Both. It's always both, and you keep looking at so many managers at Manchester United and players, and why do they all seem to fail? Because when Manchester United buy players, they're looking at the cream of the crop. They're looking at some of the best players around Europe. Well, they should be, and I think that's what they do. They pay big fees, they pay big wages. But no one can seem to handle playing for Manchester United. I mean, it's one of the most probably pressurised clubs in world football because there's so many eyes on them. But probably it's also one of the greatest clubs in world football to play for. I mean, the history that they got, the tradition, massive club, and should be competing the top end of Champions League positions and Premier League titles as well. And I think what you've also got to remember is when I go back to my playing days and people questioned at times with us, this was us when we'd be losing managers, and Manchester United always had Alex Ferguson, maybe Arsenal had Arsene Wenger, and we keep changing. No matter who you bring in, they're not Pep Guardiola. No matter what manager we brought in, it wasn't Alex Ferguson as good as him. So no matter who they bring in and say they're not getting it right, we are right now up against the Manchester City team and our manager in Pep Guardiola, who's probably the greatest of all time. So no matter who you bring in, he's not going to be as good as him. So that it's always going to be tough to start with there.
What did you make of his man management? Because obviously he fell out with Cristiano Ronaldo. That was almost the first thing that happened there under his tenure. We saw the very public falling out with Jadon Sancho. What did you make of how he was dealing with his players?
Well, I don't know what goes on in the dressing room at Manchester United, but in those two situations, Erik ten Hag was right. I mean, when they won a game away at Fulham and scored a last-minute win, and it was a great moment for sort of Manchester United in his first season. Cristiano Ronaldo was doing an interview with Piers Morgan, slaughtering the club and slaughtering the manager. So he was well within his rights, and any manager, including Sir Alex Ferguson, are doing exactly the same and booted Ronaldo out of the club for that, because that was not acceptable. And Manchester United fans know that was right. With Jadon Sancho, I mean, again, he was right. I mean, he questioned a little bit about he hadn't been training at his best because he missed the game. Is that the end of the world if a manager questions a player for him? Maybe he's not training at his best in a certain week. I mean, a manager's got to be able to, be critical, and sometimes players have got to be able to take it on the chin. All Jadon Sancho needed to do was apologise to the manager, and he'd still had a career at Manchester United. Why would you not want to stay at Manchester United, one of the biggest football clubs in the world? And all it takes is for you and the manager to go and shake hands and basically, maybe apologise. That's all it takes, and then you throw your Manchester United career away. I mean, no, Erik ten Hag was right on both those counts.
You've talked about it a lot, haven't you, on Monday Night Football, the style of play. Do you think that was part of Erik ten Hag's downfall as well?
That was the biggest thing for me. It wasn't necessarily the results. The results are always the most important in some ways, but you've got to think where the team is going. Now, if you actually look at it, it hasn't been a disaster for Manchester United with Erik ten Hag. He's won 2 trophies in 2 years. But the style of football and how easy they are to play against, there was no way continuing like that Manchester United were ever going to be in contention for a Premier League title or a Champions League title, which is where Manchester United should be. They're one of the biggest clubs in the world. They've got no divine right to win, those trophies every season, but they should be competing for them. And when you were watching his team play, even though they were getting over the line and winning cup competitions, which is great, it's part of the game, you got to win cups. But you knew it was a short-term fix. It was never going to be enough to compete with the top teams at the top end of the table. And I think I said numerous times last season, I think they were the easiest team in the Premier League to play against. When you consider the money that had been spent and the size of the club. I mean, you go back to that Crystal Palace game, you go back to how many times they played Liverpool and lost by numerous goals as well. Manchester City the same. It's just, no, it was too easy to play against Manchester United, and they were seen as an easy touch, and that hasn't changed this season.
So, do you think that this group of players, this squad of players, is a group that somebody else can get a tune out of?
Well, I think it's better than what we've seen in the last 18 months. Manchester United, what we've seen over the last year or so, should not be this poor and this easy to play against. And that is on Erik ten Hag. He's coaching the team, he's setting the team up. It was so easy to get at this team's back four. They very rarely look like scoring a goal as well. I mean, and Man United should always be exciting. They should never be boring. They shouldn't be. They should always leave you on the edge of your seat, whether you're a Man United fan or a Liverpool fan like myself. You always knew at United it was exciting. It was a brand of football. We just haven't seen that. We haven't seen that at all. So normally when you see a team who are good defensively and a little bit negative, they struggle to score, or vice versa. They're conceding lots of goals, but they're scoring lots of goals. Man United are neither. you know, if you actually look at the numbers in terms of goal difference over his tenure of sort of, what are we in now, 2.5 years? I mean, I think they've scored 11 more goals than they conceded in 2.5 years. This, you know, Man United, you know, should be one of the most exciting teams, not just in this country, but in European football, and they're a million miles away from that.
So what's needed? What is needed for them to get back to the top again?
Well, listen, they need a top manager. You look at the managers who've been successful in the Premier League era. You look at Pep now, you look at Sir Alex Ferguson, you look at Jose Mourinho, you look at Jurgen Klopp. It's not just knowing the game, it's having a personality and a presence. And Erik ten Hag never really had that. Jose's been there. I mean, he couldn't topple Pep Guardiola. And I go back to, you know, no matter who you bring in, you've got to be hopeful and fingers crossed that you don't have to compete with Pep Guardiola next season and that he moves on. You might have a chance then, but yeah, they need someone sort of presence and an aura who can, you know, they feel like they belong at Manchester United, because at times we've seen in the last sort of 10, 12 years, whether you're a player or a manager, Old Trafford and Manchester United get engulf you because it's that huge a job.
Jamie, in hindsight, which is a wonderful thing, did they miss a trick in Thomas Tuchel?
I think so. I go back to Liverpool appointing Jurgen Klopp and keeping Brendan Rodgers a long time ago now. And Brendan Rodgers was in a similar situation to Erik ten Hag, but the Liverpool board weren't quite sure whether they should keep Brendan Rodgers or move him on. They decided to keep him and change him, I think, in the October international break. And then Jurgen Klopp was available. Now, I don't know, but maybe there was a bit of method in, maybe the madness, if you like, in keeping a manager because they knew Jurgen Klopp was there. One of the reasons why they kept... I thought they may have kept Erik ten Hag was because they knew that maybe there was a manager there who still wanted to have a little bit of a break over the summer, recharge his batteries, and almost was thinking, I'm not quite sure what I want to do. I actually thought that might be Thomas Tuchel, and Manchester United might be lining that up, similar to what Liverpool did with Jurgen Klopp. But then England come from nowhere, take Thomas Tuchel, and now, you know, they change Erik ten Hag now. So... yeah, I thought that might be something in the back of the minds of the owners when they decided to keep him in the summer. Because for me, I said after the Liverpool game on Sky on the side of the pitch, I think with Gary and Roy and the boys there, that there was no way Erik ten Hag was ever going to last further than the November international break. It was impossible. It was never going to happen, that situation. So they were always going to have to change the manager within sort of 3 months of the start of the season. So I go back to the ownership. They should have made this decision in the summer and saved themselves a lot of money.
Yeah, they've got Ruud van Nistelrooy in interim charge, of course. You've played against him, haven't you? Are you surprised that he's followed in the likes of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's footsteps, easy for me to say, in taking over on a short-term basis?
No. Because he's a manager he's managed PSV Eindhoven. I think he won the Dutch title as well. Erik ten Hag changed his backroom staff in the summer. And if we're being totally honest, as soon as Ruud van Nistelrooy came in, everyone saw this happening at some stage in the season, that Ruud van Nistelrooy would take over from Erik ten Hag at some stage, maybe to the end of the season, or just maybe to get them along to a certain point until the manager they want becomes available. Everyone knew this was going to happen before the start of the season.
But just finally, Jamie, and I want you to really take your Liverpool hat off, and you want success for Manchester United, so who is your pick to get the job? I
mean, I'd give it to Gary Neville.
Really?
Listen, it looks like they're talking to Xavi from Barcelona. Now, he was one of my favourite players. He's my favourite. I think he's the greatest Spanish player of all time. I absolutely adore him. And he's managed Barcelona. He was seen as the sort of next Pep Guardiola at Barcelona. They always felt, even when he was a player, he was going to be a top manager. Now, he lost his job at Barcelona, but he still won La Liga against the Carlo Ancelotti Real Madrid. So, yes, he's out of work at the moment, which makes it easier. I think there's a link between someone on the board and maybe Xavi. There's been talk that those talks have happened in the last few days. But, yeah, it looks like it's going to be him. You know, I'm not really quite sure, you know, what Manchester United can do right now. There's been talk of Gareth Southgate, but I don't think the fans would buy that because he's got links, obviously, with the ownership. I don't think Xavi would be a bad appointment. He's got huge status as a player, World Cup winner, Euro winner, Champions League winner, played in the greatest team of all time. Doesn't make you a great manager, but what it does, it gives you instant respect in the training pit, on the training ground with the players. There's no one in that dressing room who's done more than him. And he has been a manager of a huge football club and had success. I think he's won a league and a cup competition, and he's up against Carlo Ancelotti and Real Madrid. So he hasn't got a bad CV, so I don't think that'd be a bad appointment.
Yeah, OK. Thanks for your thoughts. Always good to speak to you, Jamie. I know you wish Manchester United all the very best, don't you?
Long may this run continue.